It was supposed to be another routine day, but what happened next changed everything. A firefighter, fresh from battling a blaze, found himself at the center of an incident he never saw coming. A heated confrontation with a police officer took an ugly turn when the officer, fueled by prejudice, threw a punch. What the cop didn't realize, though, was that fate had other plans. Just as the dust began to settle, a frantic call came through. There was a fire at the police chief's house, and the one person who could make the difference, the very firefighter the cop had just struck. What happens when pride, prejudice, and duty collide? Can bridges be built in the face of crisis, or will this event spark an even greater fallout? Stick around as this gripping story unfolds, revealing unexpected twists, powerful lessons, and moments that will leave you speechless. The firefighter, Marcus, was known for his dedication and calm under pressure. He had spent years risking his life for strangers, never hesitating to answer the call of duty. That day, he was leaving the scene of a grueling fire when he encountered Officer Daniels. Tensions flared over a minor traffic issue, but what started as a misunderstanding quickly escalated. Daniels, impatient and clearly agitated, made an assumption about Marcus that led to the unthinkable. As Marcus reeled from the blow, his mind raced. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Around them, bystanders watched in stunned silence, their whispers cutting through the tension. Before anyone could intervene, Daniel's radio crackled, breaking the moment with urgent words. Chief's house on fire, possible entrapment. Marcus froze. He knew this wasn't just any call. It was a matter of life and death. And now everything depended on what happened next. Marcus stood there, his cheeks still stinging from the punch, as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. The chief's house was burning, and every second mattered. Despite what had just happened, Marcus's instincts kicked in. He couldn't ignore a call for help, no matter whose it was. Daniels, on the other hand, seemed frozen, his face pale as the realization hit him too. Around them, the crowd buzzed with disbelief. Some people pulled out their phones to record, while others shouted for Daniels to let Marcus go. But Marcus wasn't waiting for permission. He jumped into his truck, his firefighter's gear still in the back, and sped toward the chief's home. As he approached, smoke billowed into the sky, and flames licked at the roof. Neighbors were outside, panicked and shouting. Marcus's heart pounded. He didn't know what awaited him inside, but he was going in. Marcus leaped out of his truck, scanning the scene as the heat of the fire hit him like a wave. The chief's house was engulfed, and the air was thick with smoke. Neighbors pointed to an upstairs window, shouting, "Someone's still inside." Without hesitation, Marcus grabbed his gear and charged toward the flames. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels arrived, guilt etched across his face. He tried to take control of the crowd, but his voice cracked under the pressure. It was clear he hadn't expected to cross paths with Marcus again so soon, let alone in a moment like this. He watched as Marcus disappeared into the house, and for the first time, Daniels questioned everything about his actions. Inside, Marcus battled the flames, searching room by room. The smoke was blinding, the heat unbearable. Then he heard it, a faint cry for help coming from the second floor. His pulse quickened. Time was running out. Marcus pushed forward, his lungs burning as he followed the faint cry. He reached the second floor, where flames consumed everything in sight. A young girl was huddled in a corner, clutching a blanket as smoke swirled around her. "I've got you," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the chaos. He scooped her up, shielding her from the heat, and made his way back toward the stairs. But as he descended, the fire rolled with new intensity, cutting off his path. The floor beneath him groaned, threatening to give way. Outside, the crowd grew restless. Daniels paced nervously, torn between his duty and his guilt. He grabbed a radio, calling for backup, but the urgency in his voice hinted at something more, an unspoken fear that this might end in tragedy. Just then, Marcus emerged on the front porch, coughing and cradling the girl. The crowd erupted in relief, but before anyone could react, the house let out a deafening crack. Marcus froze as the roof began to collapse. As the roof started to give way, Marcus didn't think, he just ran. With the girl still in his arms, he sprinted toward the edge of the porch, leaping off just as the structure collapsed behind him in a fiery explosion. The force of the blast sent him tumbling onto the lawn, but he held the girl tight, shielding her from harm. The crowd surged forward, cheering and clapping, but Marcus barely noticed. He handed the girl to her mother, who had been screaming in terror moments before, and collapsed onto his knees, coughing and gasping for air. Daniel stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. For the first time, he saw Marcus not as an adversary, but as a hero, a man who risked everything to save another. Approaching slowly, Daniels extended a hand to help Marcus up, but before Marcus could respond, a fire chief arrived on the scene. It wasn't just any fire chief, it was Daniel's father. The weight of everything hit Daniels at once. His father looked at Marcus with gratitude and pride, then turned to his son. "You owe him more than an apology," the chief said, his voice firm but steady. Daniels nodded, his face pale, knowing this moment would change his life forever. And as Marcus stood, brushing off the ash, he gave Daniels a small, knowing nod before walking away, leaving the officer to confront not only his actions, but also the man he wanted to become. In the days that followed, Marcus's act of bravery became the talk of the town. The girl he saved made a full recovery, and her family expressed their endless gratitude. As for Daniels, the incident forced him to take a hard look at himself. The public scrutiny, combined with his father's disappointment, was a wake-up call he couldn't ignore. Slowly, he began making amends, starting with a public apology to Marcus. Marcus, however, wasn't one to dwell on the past. "I just did my job," he said simply when reporters asked about the confrontation with Daniels. But his actions had done more than save a life. They had sparked a conversation about accountability and unity. The fire may have burned the chief's house to the ground, but it also ignited something bigger, a chance for change. And for Marcus, that was worth more than any recognition.